Frankly, one of the teams that's easy to make fun of in the National Football League based off of recent history is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And to be honest, you have a lot of reason to make fun of them. They've just been bad. They've been boo boo. And 2013, in a way, looks like it was more of the same for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, they finished with a top 5 draft pick. They were 4-12. They finished last in the division. In fact, that top 5 pick was a third overall pick. And you look at the Jaguars and you say, oh, that's another bad season and another crappy season for the Jaguars. But you got to look a little deeper. They won 4 games, which a lot of people assume there was no shot in hell of that happening. A lot of people assumed, and understandably so, that this team was probably going to be the runaway leaders in the clubhouse and throughout the entire season to end up with the #1 overall selection and win the Jadeveon Clowney, at the time Teddy Bridgewater, sweepstakes. But Gus Bradley, the first-year head coach, got more out of this team than I think anybody could have imagined because, frankly, along with maybe the Oakland Raiders, they had the least talented roster in the entire National Football League. They ended up winning 4 games. Some people will knock that and say, well, they just won games that didn't really matter. But sometimes it does matter, and sometimes it's important to change the identity of the organization and change the attitude, the aura, the mindset surrounding and inside of that organization as a whole. And with the Jaguars winning 4 games, they also had other games that they fought very hard. They didn't give up. They played better as a team. And I point to that game against the Denver Broncos where everybody's sitting there and assuming that they're going to get boat raced and they're going to lose by 35, 40 points. And they really went into Denver and stuck a game to the Denver Broncos. And I think that's a testament to Gus Bradley, the head coach, and the players as well. The Jacksonville Jaguars, their needle is slowly starting to point in the positive direction. They're not all the way there yet because they were in a bad way, in bad shape as an organization, but they're getting there. Be patient, Jaguar fans. You're getting there. You've got the right man running the show as head coach, and you're starting to put some nice pieces in place. And this was an important offseason for the Jacksonville Jaguars because this was really going to be the opportunity for Gus Bradley to really put his stamp on this team, on this organization. I understand Caldwell's the general manager, but ultimately you brought in Gus Bradley from the Seattle Seahawks to bring some of that wisdom, some of that philosophy from Pete Carroll in Seattle, and now you could start to see that playing out. They brought in Red Bryant and Chris Clemens from the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks in the offseason. Not only do they bring veteran experience and championship experience, they bring familiarity for Gus Bradley and that defense that he wants to run, just like what was run in Seattle for so many years. They brought in Toby Gerhart from the Minnesota Vikings to replace Maurice Jones-Drew and potentially be their lead back. They brought in Zane Beadles to help fortify at least a little bit the interior of that line from the Denver Broncos. They went in the first round and they shocked the world by drafting Blake Bortles 3rd overall in a move that at that time nobody, and I emphasize again, nobody saw coming. Then drafting young talent around him, guys like Marquise Lee and Allen Robinson. The Jaguars made some nice moves and they brought in some very nice pieces in this offseason. The biggest loss is obviously Maurice Jones-Drew, but another big one would be the heart of that offensive line in the middle, and that's Brad Meester. I'm not sure if they've got the replacement for Brad Meester in place, but you sit there and you lose Maurice Jones-Drew, who wasn't quite the same running back he had been a couple years before, replace him with the Toby Gerhart. And the biggest loss you might have is your center. You got to feel pretty good about your offseason. And heading into 2014, this is something that a year ago I might have really struggled to artificially create some things to praise the Jacksonville Jaguars about, but I do have that. First and foremost, it's Gus Bradley. I'm a huge fan of his, and I think he's the guy to get the job done in Jacksonville. I'm not going to go so far as to say he will take them to the Super Bowl someday, but Jaguars fans, I assure you that at some point in time soon, whether it be maybe 2015, 2016, Gus Bradley is going to have the Jaguars be more than just respectable. They're going to be consistently competitive, and they're going to be making the playoffs. This guy just has it, and this guy, I think, is the right man for them, and I think he's going to do lots of great things for them, and I think you'll start to see some of that play out in this upcoming season. I like the young wide receiving core that they have there in Jacksonville. You talk about Cecil Shorts and your second round picks and Marquise Lee and Allen Robinson. Got some other pieces in place. This is a wide receiving core. You throw in Ace Sanders maybe into the mix. This is a wide receiving core that has some talent, has some athleticism, and the great thing about it is it's young. For a team that doesn't have at their disposal their first round pick from 2 years ago and Justin Blackmon, the guy that they envisioned to be that long term number one wide receiver, that Jimmy Smith type of guy, they've done a pretty good job of moving on life after him, and they've got a nice little wide receiving core there. And I also think they're strong on special teams. The returners might not be the greatest in the world, but Josh Scobie is arguably one of those players that you might put on the Jacksonville Jaguars Mount Rushmore if you so desire. And then the punter they took in the third round a couple of years ago, Brian Anger, has, largely not disappointed all that much, and I thought he had a solid season last year. So special teams is a very important part of the game, and I think the Jaguars are improving in that way, and I think it will be a strength for this team in 2014. Some big question marks, offensive line. You did lose Brad Meester in the middle. Bringing in Zane Beadles sounds like a great thing, but I don't think he played that well last season. Luke Jokel going over and manning the blind side full time. Here was a guy who missed most of the season last year due to injury. How is he going to adjust from going from right tackle to left tackle at the NFL level? Looking at the secondary, I still have some concerns. As much as I am a fan of Gus Bradley, and as much as I like what he's doing with the team, and as much as I can see some of the growth and improvement on the defensive side of the ball, I'm just not sure that the Jimmies and Joes are there in the secondary, and I think that might be the Achilles heel and the weakness for this defense in this upcoming season. I also have some question marks about whether or not Chad Henne should really be the starter. I understand that this is the plan, that this is the intention, that Henne's going to start most, if not all, of the season, and that you wait for Blake Bortles, until 2015. But sometimes just because that's the plan, that doesn't mean that's the right thing to do. And when you look at this team, is Henne really that much better than Bortles at this point? And if Henne is a veteran and he's here, and Bortles is pretty much here and he's only a rookie, then it would stand to reason that Bortles would only get better as the season would go along, where Henne's pretty much going to be what Henne is. Why would you start Chad Henne over Blake Bortles at this point in time, when part of the reason you were in the position to draft Blake Bortles this year to begin with the third overall pick was because Chad Henne was your starter at quarterback the majority of the season? I don't really get it. Now, heading into their schedule for 2014, you've got the AFC North, the NFC East, and then somehow they ended up with San Diego and Miami in terms of their AFC conference games. I thought that was kind of unfair. One key game that I'm really going to pay attention to is after the first 2 weeks, where I believe they've got the Eagles on the road and the Redskins on the road, they host the Indianapolis Colts. And this is kind of one of those danger games for the Colts. And this is a chance for the Jacksonville Jaguars to really make an early season statement and say they're not the same old Jaguars, and really stick a game to the Indianapolis Colts and perhaps even shock the world. If they could somehow find a way, I know crazy as it sounds, to beat the Indianapolis Colts in Jacksonville, man, while that might not mean much for the individual season of 2014, that is a huge confidence builder and a huge building block for this organization for years to come. Their keys to success, I think they need their defense to progress. They need their offensive line to play at a solid level. They need these young wide receivers, especially like a Marquise Lee, to play well and help out, whether it's Chad Henne or Blake Bortles. They need Gerhart to become that kind of feature back. They need that front seven of that defense specifically to play like Gus Bradley needs them to in that system that he brought over from Seattle. Overall, I think the Jaguars, I'm not going to sit there and totally crown their asses just yet. I think based off of what some people have seen from the starters in the preseason, they're getting a little carried away. I do think this organization is heading in the right direction. And I do think this organization has improved quite a bit this offseason. And I think that you're going to see some of that in the way they play, especially as the season progresses. I think the Jaguars should at least win 6 games, and I ultimately think they might go 7-9 and finish third in the AFC South. And if they can do that, based off of where they've been the past few seasons, man, you got to feel really good about their chances in 2015 and beyond.